Okay, so let's double check answering the questions on this listening part, the geology class. Okay, what's the lecture mainly about? The main idea of the lecture. Is it a process for improving drainage system? Letter B, a comparison of different types of drainage systems. Letter C, the relationship among the most common drainage systems. Letter D, the changes that occur in the drainage systems over the time. The right answer is, yes, it's letter D, the changes that occur in the drainage system over the time. The next question. Listen again to part of the lecture and answer the following question. Okay, today we're going to discuss the four major of drainage patterns. I trust you have already read the chapter, so you can recall that a drainage pattern is the arrangement of channels that carry water in an area. So what does the professor say this? Why does the professor say this? I trust you have already read the chapter, so you can recall that a drainage pattern is arrangement of channels that carry water in area. Remember that he trusts the students that they can recall. When someone trusts that someone will recall, this means one of the following: to remind the students of the topic for today's session, to indicate that he expects the students to read the textbook, to encourage the students to participate in the discussion, to demonstrate his respect for the students in the class. Remember, he reminds them to recall, which means that he wants them, or he encouraged the students to participate in the discussion. Once they know it already and they're gonna recall the information, they're gonna interact with the teacher inside the classroom, so they're gonna participate in the discussion. So the right answer is letter C, to encourage the students to participate in the discussion. How does the professor introduce the dendritic drainage system? Letter A, by demonstrating how this very old system has evolved, by comparing it to both the tree and the human circulatory system, by criticizing the efficiency of the branches in the system, by drawing conclusions about the climate in the area. Yes, what's the right answer? Yeah, exactly, letter B, by comparing it to both a tree and the human circulatory system. Next. Why does the professor mention the spokes of a wheel? To make a point about the stream bed in the turtle's pattern, to contrast the formation with that of a rectangular one, to explain the structure of a radial drainage system, to give an example of dendritic drainage system. Of course, the right answer is, yes, I hear someone over there. Thank you. It's to explain the structure of a radial drainage system, which is letter C. To explain the structure of a radial drainage system. Next. In the lecture, the professor discusses the trellis drainage pattern. Indicate whether each of the following is typical of his pattern. Click in the correct box for each phrase. So we're going to have this table. Yeah, and we do have here some information. The one which is typical, we will add yes. The one which is not typical, we will add here, or we will take the box with no. So number A, or letter A, parallel stream beds flowing beside each other. Is that true or false? Applicable or not applicable? Yes, this is applicable. So here, yes. And use here something. Yes. Stream beds with sharp 90 degrees turns. Is that applicable or not? Is that right or not? This is no, of course. Drainage form the top of a central peak. Drainage form the top of central peak. This is no. Hard rock formations on top of soft rock formation. Hard rock formations on top of soft rock formations. This is yes. Geological evidence of folding with our croppings. Geological evidence of folding with our croppings. Yes, this is also right. Okay. Next. Number 11. What does the professor imply when he says that? So I don't want to plan to trick you with test questions about exceptional patterns. Again, so I don't want plan to trick you with test questions about exceptional patterns. This means that the test questions will be very difficult, or the students should read their textbooks before the test, or the basic patterns from the notes will be on the test, or the test will influence the final grade. Think carefully and decide, figure out where is the right answer. Exactly, letter C. The basic patterns from the notes will be on the test. Notes here, I don't want to plan to trick you with test questions about exceptional patterns. Exceptional patterns. So exceptional patterns will not be included, which means that the basic patterns will be included, that they wrote already with their notes. So the right answer for number 11 is letter C. The basic patterns from the notes will be on the test. Next. We do have this practice test 103. It's a lecture from an art class. A lecture from an art class. So try to imagine what you're going to have inside the art class. The language is very important. The language, of course, is going to be different from the first conversation that you listen to and the second geology class that you listen to. The vocab here is different from there, the tone and everything. So you need to note this. Make sure that you understand the listening part. Try with the questions on the video and then come back to me to double check the right answer with you. Okay, hold on.
Listen to part of a lecture in an art class. The professor is discussing drawing.
Drawing is a very basic art form. It's appealing because it can be used to make a very quick record of the ideas that an artist may be envisioning. So a drawing can serve as a visual aid for the artist to remember a certain moment of inspiration and maybe use it for a more detailed work later on. Okay. Usually such sketches allow the artist to visualize the proportions and the shapes without much attention to details. So these images can be used by painters, architects, sculptors, any artist really. And large renderings, sketches of parts of the whole, these can be helpful in the creative process when a huge image might be more difficult to conceive of in its entirety. Or a sketch of just one face in a crowd can allow the artist to focus on creating just that part of the image. So in many artist studios, countless drawings are strewn about as the final painting or sculpture takes form. And this gives us insight into the creative process, as well as the opportunity to see changes from the images at the beginning in the images of the finished work. It's rare, in fact, for an artist to use permanent materials to begin a piece of art. And some painters, for example, even sketch onto the surface of the canvas before applying the pigments. Now, architects are especially prone to sketches because, of course, their buildings are so large that an image in smaller scale is necessary to the imagination and implementation of such projects. So these studies become the basis for future works. And again, this is very interesting as a record of the creative process. Okay so far? Okay. Drawing has several other functions besides as a temporary reference. For centuries, artists have used drawing as a traditional method of education. By copying the great works, especially of the old masters, aspiring artists could learn a lot about proportion, how to capture light and shadow, and so forth. In fact, some artists who later achieve recognition still continue to use this practice to hone their skills, or simply to pay homage to another artist, as is often the case when a work of art originally created in another medium, like a sculpture, when it's recreated in the form of a drawing. Many examples of drawings of Michelangelo's sculptures were recreated by well-known artists. One that comes to mind is The Study of Michelangelo's Bound Slave by Edgar Degas. The original, by Michelangelo, was a marble sculpture that was, about 7 feet in height, but the small drawing was made in a sketch pad. In any case, the study is also considered a masterpiece, on a small scale, of course. So, what additional purposes might be served by the medium of drawing? Well, let's remember that photography is a relatively new art form. So, prior to the use of photographs to record historical events, a quick drawing by an artist was about the only way to preserve a real-time visual account of an important moment. Although a more permanent visual impression might be rendered later, it would be based on memory and not on the artist's actual observation. Probably the most often cited example of a sketch that preserved an historical record would be the small drawing of Marie Antoinette as she was taken to the guillotine in a cart through the streets of Paris. Jacques-Louis David sketched this famous drawing on a piece of paper about the size of the palm of his hand. And the artist as a reporter, is still important even in modern times when photography isn't possible. For example, when judges won't permit cameras in the courtroom. Okay, to review. We've talked about 3 functions for drawing: as a visual aid for the artist to complete a future work, as a method of education for aspiring artists or even practiced artists, and a way to report an event. But the sketchbook has other possibilities. Sometimes a drawing is the final execution of the art. Picasso produced hundreds of drawings in, every conceivable medium, but especially in pencil and crayon. I find it very interesting that Picasso did so much of this kind of work, drawing I mean, in his last years. Some critics have argued that he was just laughing at the art world, which was willing to pay outrageous sums for anything with his name on it. And clearly, a drawing can be executed in a short period of time. But other critics, they feel as I do, that Picasso was drawing because it was so basic, and because it was so spontaneous, and so much fun. And also, think about how difficult it really is to produce a quick drawing with a few lines and no opportunity to recreate the original, either by painting it out or remodeling the clay or changing the building materials or any of the other methods for revision of a finished artistic work that artists have at their disposal. So what I'm saying is that drawing, when it's elevated to a finished piece, it must be done with confidence, and it must show a high degree of creativity and mastery of the art form. In a way, it harkens back to the beginnings of art itself, when some unknown artist must have stuck a finger in the earth to draw an image or Maybe he picked up a stone and made a drawing on the wall of a cave. Okay, so as a first assignment, I want you to make a couple of sketches yourself. I'm not going to grade them. This isn't a studio art class. I just want you to use a few basic strokes to capture an image. You can do the first one in pencil, crayon, ink, chalk, or even charcoal, whatever you like. Then I want you to sketch the same image in a different medium. So if you do a face in pencil, I want you to do the same face, but in chalk or crayon. Bring them to class next week and we'll continue our discussion of drawing. But we'll talk more about the materials artists use to produce drawings, and we'll refer to your sketches as examples.
12. What is the lecture mainly about? (13) According to the professor, why do architects use sketches? (14) Listen again to part of the lecture and then answer the following question.
So these studies become the basis for future works. And again, this is very interesting as a record of the creative process. Okay so far?
What does the professor mean when she says this?
Okay so far?
(15) Why does the professor mention the drawing of Marie Antoinette? (16) What is the professor's opinion of Picasso? (17) According to the lecture, what are the major functions of drawing?
Listening is not that task hard, but it needs more practice. Don't worry if you didn't catch any specific information or you didn't catch a question. It's not that difficult. And remember that you're not native speaker. You will not get all the questions inside the exam, but you need to get high score. This is the point. So let's double check answering the questions on this um, listening part on the art lecture. What's the lecture mainly about? What's the lecture mainly about? A, B, C, D. Of course, letter C. The distinct purposes of drawing. The main purpose of the lecture is the distinct purposes of drawing. Different purposes of drawing. Okay? Then this is number 13. Why the architects use sketches. Architects are not clear about the final design at the beginning. To design large buildings, architects must work on smaller scale. Engineers use architects' sketches to implement details. Sketches are used as a record of the stages in development. Actually, the right answer is, yeah, letter A. Architects are not clear about the final design at the beginning. When they start, they don't know what's going to be the end. That's why they use sketches. Listen again to the part of the lecture and decide whether the lecturer says the following question. So these studies become the basis for future works, and again, this is very interesting as a record of the creative process. Okay, so far? So why does a professor mean or say, okay, so far? Once a professor says, okay, so far, or so far, so good, he or she's checking to be sure that the students understand. This is the right answer. So far, so good? Yes, this is my question to you. Do you understand so far? I want also to double check the understanding of those who are watching me right now. So far, so good? It's okay? Okay, perfect. So the right answer, she's checking to be sure that the students understand. What does the professor mean when she mentioned the drawing of Marie Antoinette? It's an example of a work copied in another medium. Drawing was typical of the way that artists were educated. The sketch was a historical account of an important event. The size of the drawing made it an exceptional work of art. The right answer is, yeah, think about it, A or PQRS, which one? Yes, the size of drawing made it an exceptional work of art. This is letter S. So, number 15, the right answer for it is letter S. The size of the drawing made it an exceptional work of art. Next. What's the professor's opinion of Picasso? I'm talking here about the professor's opinion, not the opinion of other writers who wrote about him. This is very important when you focus on listening. Picasso was probably playing a joke by offering drawings for sale. At the end of his career, Picasso may have chosen drawing because it's easy. Picasso's drawings required the confidence and skill of a master artist. Cave drawings were an inspiration for many of Picasso's works. The right answer is letter C. Picasso's drawings required the confidence and skill of a master artist. This was the teacher's point of view about Picasso, that his drawings required the confidence and skill of a master artist. According to the lecture, what are the major functions of drawing? What are the major functions of drawings? We need to choose 3 from these, by the way. We need to choose 3 according to the video that you watched and listened to. A technique to remember parts of large work, a method to preserve a historical record, an example of earlier forms of art, an educational approach to train artists, a process for experimenting with media. So, if you cannot, all of them are alike, but you need to choose the best 3. Okay? So, here, this kind of question needs a conclusion. In other words, not all the data are found there, but you need to come up with a conclusion according or based on the data that you listen to or the material that you listen to. So we're going to choose 3. Of course, a technique to remember parts of large work, a method to preserve a historical record, an educational approach to train artists. So the 3 choices here, A, B, and D. A, B, and D. Now, with the 4th one, professor's office. So we're gonna listen to a conversation between a professor and his students at his office. Listen carefully. Don't forget to take your notes while listening because this is very important. Try to answer the questions there and come back to me to double check them. Hold on.
Listen to a conversation on campus between a student and a professor.
Thanks for seeing me, Professor Williams.
Glad to, Alice. What do you have on your mind?
Well, I got a little mixed up when I started to go over my notes from the last class, so I had a few questions.
Shoot.
Okay. I understand the 3 basic sources of personnel for multinational companies. That's fairly self-explanatory.
Host country, home country, and third country.
Right. But then you started talking about staffing patterns that... Let me see. Okay. You said staffing patterns may vary depending on the length of time that the multinational company has been operating. And you gave some examples, but I got confused and now I can't read my notes.
Okay. Well, one pattern is to rely on home country managers to staff the key positions when the company opens, but gradually moving more host country nationals into upper management as the company grows.
So, for example, if a French company opened a factory in Canada, then French management would gradually replace themselves with Canadian managers? Is that what you mean?
Right. I think I used that very example in class. So, do you want to try to explain the second pattern to me?
Sure. I think it's the one where home country nationals are put in charge of the company if it's located in a developed country, but in a developing country, then home country nationals manage the company sort of indefinitely.
Right again. And an example of that would be...
Maybe using German management for a Swiss company in Germany, but they might send Swiss management to provide leadership for a Swiss company in...
How about Zimbabwe?
This is one of the confusing parts. Zimbabwe has a very old and highly developed culture, so...
But it's still defined as a developing country because of the economic base, which is being developed now.
Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. Then the example of the American company with British management, when the company's in India, that would be a third country pattern?
Yes. In fact, this pattern's fairly prevalent among multinational companies in the United States. Many Scottish or English managers have been hired for top management positions at United States subsidiaries in the former British colonies. India, Jamaica, the West Indies, some parts of Africa.
Okay, so I've got all the examples right now.
Anything else?
Just one thing. There were some typical patterns for certain countries.
Like the last example.
No, this came later in the lecture. Something about Japan and Europe?
Oh, right. I probably said that both Japanese multinational companies and European companies tend to assign senior-level home country managers to overseas locations for their entire careers, whereas multinational companies in the United States view overseas assignments as temporary, so they may actually find themselves reporting to a senior-level manager from the host country who has more experience.
So, for example, a Japanese company in the United States would most probably have senior-level Japanese managers with mid-level managers maybe from the United States. But in Japan, the senior-level Japanese managers at an American company would probably have mid-level American managers reporting to them.
Well, generalities are always a little tricky, but for the most part, that would be a typical scenario, because living as a permanent expatriate is a career move in Japan, but a temporary strategy in the United States.
Okay, that's interesting.
And important for you to know as a business major with an interest in international business. You're still on that track, aren't you?
I sure am, but, I wasn't thinking in terms of living abroad for my entire career. That really is a huge commitment, and something to ask about going in. Anyway, like you say, most American companies view overseas assignments as temporary. That's more what I have in mind for myself, I mean.
(18) Why does the woman go to see her professor? 19. According to the professor, which factor causes staffing patterns to vary? 20. Listen again to part of the conversation and then answer the following question.
I think it's the one where home country nationals are put in charge of the company if it's located in a developed country, but in a developing country, then home country nationals manage the company sort of indefinitely.
Right again. And an example of that would be...
Why does the professor say this?
And an example of that would be...
(21) Which of the following would be an example of a third country pattern? (22) According to the professor, how do senior-level Japanese managers view their assignments abroad?